So I am honored to introduce our next panel, which is transforming our energy system. It's being moderated by Jeremiah Bauman, who's Chief of Staff for the Undersecretary of Infrastructure at the U.S. Department of Energy. An incredible array of leaders from the public sector, from the Department of Energy, from its Loan Programs Office, from Rewiring America, Keisha Austin, who have a vision for how do we decarbonize electricity and transportation and are working towards it. Sunil Paul from Spring Free EV, they are financing the uptake at scale of electric vehicles. And then, of course, Britta McIntosh from Ameresco. What I love about Ameresco is that they are a technology-neutral energy company. So they find the best energy efficiency technologies, the best renewable energy technologies, and they work with cities, with corporations, with governments, the private sector to deploy those technologies strategically. So please join me in welcoming our panel to the stage. Jeremiah and team. Hi. Good to see you too. Right here.
All right, do we have audio?
Hello, mic check.
Sound check?
Hello.
Sound check. We're on.
Well, thank you, everybody. It's great to be here. I'm Jeremiah Bauman, I'm the Chief of Staff to the newly established Office of the Undersecretary for Infrastructure at the U.S. Department of Energy. I'll talk a little bit about our mission, where the U.S. Department of Energy is at, how it fits into the Biden administration's overall vision for how we build a clean and just new energy economy as one part of addressing the climate crisis, and then kick it off to our panelists to make some remarks, and we'll take it from there. The view of Secretary Jennifer Granholm is really that, this will not be a unique statement, but we really do find ourselves at such a new and unprecedented place. And it's not just about the climate crisis, though that is, of course, dominant in the work that we're doing and in shaping the administration's priorities. It's the interconnectedness of the different crises that we're facing as a country and as a planet. The climate crisis, the crisis around justice, racial justice, economic justice, about good, high-quality jobs for working families across the country. And even in a global sense, a different version of economic problem, as we've discovered, our supply chains, our manufacturing capacity aren't where they need to be when things like a global pandemic arises. But it's not just the sort of negative and the frightening, sort of doom and gloom scenario that defines the unique moment we're at. It's also the opportunity that is before us. In an era like no other, certainly in my experience working on climate change and energy policy, we find ourselves at the cusp of having all of the solutions at hand and knowing how to deploy them. Just need to figure out how we as a society, as communities, as states, as business leaders, as governments, as civil society, work together to implement the solutions that are before us. It wasn't the case 5 years ago that you could say on just traditional, economic cost basis, cleaner energy sources are outcompeting in most of the United States and increasingly most of the world, traditional fossil fuel-based energy sources. It wasn't that you could say that today, if you switch to an electric vehicle, you can immediately just be off of oil. There just weren't that many electric vehicles that were available, much less in the situation we are today, which is that owning and operating an electric vehicle is cheaper than owning and operating an internal combustion engine. And of course, the same is true for clean electricity, increasingly for heating your home or your business with electricity. It's of course not universally true, but even for those quote unquote harder to decarbonize sectors, industrial emissions, heavier duty transportation and so forth, the solution set is becoming clearer. We know there's a portfolio of solutions that are likely going to end up being the path to a net zero economy. And the question is, how quickly can we keep that technology advancing? And really, how quickly can we demonstrate and commercialize that technology to get it out so that society and the private sector can take the technology and run with it the way that is currently happening with so many clean energy technologies. And that really is a lot of how the Department of Energy thinks about the technology side of this challenge. For much of the department's history, the energy side of our work has focused 80% on research and development, earlier stage development of new technologies, new materials to bring the cost of solar energy down, to bring the cost of batteries down. And only 20% on that latter stage, how do you move technologies from the lab out into the market, into society through demonstrating technology so the private sector can see how they work and start adopting them. Through policies to just deploy them, right? Even though clean energy technology is now cheaper in many ways, that doesn't mean it's going to deploy as quickly as we need it to in order to address the climate crisis. So tax credits, incentives, lots of states are using clean energy standards to speed that deployment. Well, that's exactly how we're thinking about the challenge before us at the Department of Energy, and that's exactly what this new Undersecretary for Infrastructure office is about. But it's not just about climate and energy technology, it's about building the economy around that technology in the way that we know we need to build it. It's about confronting the challenges of environmental justice and energy justice, the disproportionate burdens, not just the legacy of environmental pollution from fossil fuels, but disproportionately high energy bills that burden American families, that drive people into bankruptcy in the middle of a pandemic, that disproportionately affect communities of color and low-income families. And it's about the economic justice of our workplace, about having jobs that pay a living wage, that provide good benefits, and that have the manufacturing supply chains in our country so that we are able to be reliant and have resilience when crisis strikes. And so we get the good benefits that go along with those kinds of jobs. All of those priorities are the foundation of the president's energy agenda, addressing all those priorities at the same time, building a new energy economy that is more just, that looks at the structural problems we've got to address. And the good news is they are also at the foundation of the bipartisan infrastructure law that became law, was signed into law by President Biden last fall. A wide range of investments from transportation to getting lead pipes out of our communities. At the Department of Energy, it's $62 billion across a range of technologies. And we are in the midst right now of rolling out and deploying those investments. And they range from community investments, several $billion for states and communities to deploy a whole range of clean energy technologies. It's really a DIY, make your own roadmap series of programs where communities can choose their investments across energy efficiency, renewable energy, battery storage, and so forth. Nearly $20 billion to upgrade and modernize our electrical grid that we both need to be more resilient in case of wildfire, in case of winter storm. But of course, we need it to move more clean energy from where it's cheapest to where the most people need it, to lower bills and decarbonize our grid at the same time. We've got billions of dollars for industrial sector decarbonization, for hydrogen that can provide energy storage, that can replace fossil fuels in manufacturing sectors, as well as for technologies like carbon storage, direct air capture, that even if we maximize the potential of renewable energy, energy efficiency, energy storage in the power sector, in the transportation sector, where those technologies are already the most cost-effective solution, there are still these sectors that need additional technologies, and that's where hydrogen, carbon capture come into place, and of course direct air capture, because even if we got to net zero tomorrow, we would need to bring down the levels of carbon that are in the atmosphere today. So I won't go through the standard PowerPoint where I list all 72 provisions Congress in their wisdom asked us to implement. We've got a lot of work ahead of us. Only 60 of those 72 programs exist today. But the other thing I want to mention, because I think it gets a little bit to a theme about how we approach these challenges as a society, is how do we organize ourselves? What are the right structures and collaborations? Secretary Granholm really came into the department with a vision, which is that we've been built as a research and development institution. We grew out of the World War II Manhattan Project, an unprecedented scientific push by the federal government to develop atomic energy. We were originally the Atomic Energy Commission. Then we were merged with the Energy Research and Deployment Administration, or Development Administration. But it was 80% R&D. The future of building a new clean energy economy, and in fact, the bipartisan law that we are now implementing, which triples our energy spending on an annual basis at the Department of Energy, is the most transformative thing to happen in the department's history. It's also 95% not early stage research and development, but it's deployment. It's moving technologies from market to lab by demonstrating them, helping to commercialize them, by connecting with the investors who are going to be key to much broader private sector and social investment, and then community-based deployment. So to do that, the Secretary reorganized the department, and that's where this new Undersecretary for Infrastructure comes in. We are organized not around technology verticals. We don't have an Office of Renewable Energy or an Office of Nuclear Energy. Those are still offices in the department and will continue to lead with new fundings and new investment, the research and development path of the future. But we're organized around how do we deploy those technologies in the world around us. So we have an Office of Clean Energy Demonstrations to commercially demonstrate hydrogen and carbon capture. We have an Office of Manufacturing and Energy Supply Chains to build domestic clean battery manufacturing to power electric vehicles in our grid. We have an Office of State and Community Energy Programs to work with local governments, county governments, state governments on energy efficiency, renewable energy, electric vehicle deployment. We have an Office of Indian Energy Policy and Programs to work with hundreds of tribal nations across the country. And we have a grid deployment office to work on the electrical grid that connects all of those sectors and communities together. So we're thinking a lot about how we organize ourselves and how we engage with the community. So that's, before I pass it on to my colleagues, I'll just mention that last note. We are looking for public input, for public engagement, not only in a very literal, very government-y way where each of these new programs will sort of put out program designs about who should apply for grants to build battery factories or demonstrate hydrogen energy storage, and what should the rules be for how we decide to competitively award these grants, how do we make them accessible to local communities. And those will be out for public comment in a sort of formal submit your written comment on the DOE website way. But we also are looking for new ways to engage communities in person, online, in the real world, to help actually make sure these programs work at the community level, work for stakeholders that haven't been at the table before. How do we deploy community energy programs that existed during the Recovery Act, but weren't designed to engage directly with communities of color who face a lot of the most serious challenges in the energy sector? How do we connect with the private sector so that as the federal government it winds down investments 5 to 10 years from now, these are generally 5 to 10 year spending programs, we have demonstrated technologies in a way that the private sector steps in and invests and keeps building new battery factories, keeps taking up new technology, and we keep addressing the challenges of the future because we know that we don't actually have the ability to one and done solve this program, even with a 10-year infrastructure build out. It's going to be an ongoing and iterative program to keep making the system not just cleaner and more sustainable, but more resilient and more just and a better foundation for all of society. So why don't I stop there and pass it over to Keisha to talk to us about your work at Rewiring America and the community engagement that you're doing.
All right, y'all. I have to stand because I've been sitting for a while, so I'm going to come over to this podium, and I hope you guys don't mind that, so I can talk. And I do have PowerPoint slides, so we are going to have to go through a couple PowerPoints, but I promise it's not 72. Good morning, everyone. I'm Keisha Austin. I'm the head of partnerships and engagement at Rewiring America. I am also a recovering attorney, regulator, and also a utility consumer advocate. So I've had and I also spent some time in media and entertainment. And so how did I get here to the point, right, where I am focused, my whole life now is all about clean energy. And it started when I was in law school, and I was in law school in Houston, Texas, and I didn't know that there was such a thing as energy choice, and you could choose who your supplier would be until I got to Texas. And what I realized is, wait a minute, low and limited income families, right, need a better understanding about how rates work so that they can get the best rates for their households, right, and also understand how to save and really get the most out of their energy. So I became a utility consumer advocate and loved doing that work. And then I kind of lost my mind and went to be a regulator at the California Public Utilities Commission, where I did grid planning and reliability. So basically what that means in layman terms is I just worked with the utilities to ensure that they were planning for new load, and in particular distributed energy resources. So we're talking about solar, right, batteries, and storage. And so that was a very exciting, challenging job. But then I had this opportunity. I learned about Rewiring America. And actually, I was one of the lead analysts on a new proceeding at the commission focused on electrification, so it sort of just came up at the right time. And I said, well, let me check rewiring out. And it has been such an honor to start doing the work that I'm doing with Rewiring America. And I'm really excited to be here with you all this afternoon or this morning, wherever we are, whatever time zone. I'm very excited to be here. This is my first time at the Sun Valley Forum, first time in Idaho, so I'm having all kind of firsts with you. So thank you for sharing that with me. All right, so I want to electrify everything, right? And not I want to electrify everything. The future is electric, period, point blank. The way that we're going to get to our climate goals, right, that 1.5 Celsius goal is through electrification. And that's what brought our three founders together in July of 2020. Dr. Saul Griffith did a study for the US government. And when he did that study, he was looking at mapping US energy flows. And what he came up with in that study is that about 42% of the emissions we're seeing are centered around energy-related decisions we're making at our household tables. And when you look at it, when we look at where we live, learn, work, play, pray, it's more around 70%. So sounds like a big opportunity to me for folks to be a part of this solution. So let's look at the kind of decisions people are making that are helping to drive the 42% of emissions. Many of us might be in the market now for a car. It might take you 2 years to get one, but we're in the market. Or we're trying to heat our homes, figure out how we're going to cook our food and how we're going to dry our clothes. And of course, there's a supply side. Where is our electricity coming from? Today, I'm focused on the demand side. I'm focused on what we can do as individuals and communities to tackle the climate challenge that we are facing. So what does that look like? Household and communities, they've got to be the center of climate policy, right? We want businesses, we want elected leaders, we want the feds, we want all of them, but this is a people-powered movement. And it has to be centered around households so that they have an opportunity to take part and be a climate hero themselves and actually see the results in their households, right? They're going to be more comfortable, they're going to be breathing cleaner air. This is really a great opportunity for folks to be a part of something bigger than all of us. So what does that look like? It means we're going to need new household infrastructure. And it means that we're going to do a billion machines. 1 billion machines need to be replaced, folks. But it is absolutely achievable. Let me show you what that looks like. That looks like 95 million stoves, ranges, grills, and gas cooktops, 98 million space heaters, 19 million dryers, 117 million water heaters, and 220 million vehicles. That is what we have to do. And it is absolutely achievable, especially when climate policy is centered around the household and communities. And on the grand scale, our goal is to be electrifying 500,000 homes a month, okay? For the next 25 years. It's a lot, but it's not something that we cannot achieve, right? We have had all kind of moon shots and walking on the moon. We can do it. This is not unattainable. And right now, we're at about 500 homes a month, so we got a ways to go, and we don't have the time to kind of drag our feet, right? That's why it's important for households and communities to be a part of this solution. It is the only way that we're going to get there. We cannot just rely on business, government. This is a people situation. This is a people-driven solution. And it's a unifying solution. I know some folks have questions. Oh, what are we going to do? How can we do that? We're going to figure it out together. That's the thing about electrification, is it's something that everybody can come together around, and we can solve what the challenges are together. It doesn't matter which community you're from. I'm from South Central Los Angeles, and look at me, I'm in Idaho, Sun Valley, Idaho right now, right? Talking to you about how each of you in this room today can participate in this electrification movement that we're trying to build. And as I said, we are building an electrification movement. Vic talked about this yesterday, movement building, and how important it is for us to focus our work on building a movement. And so that's what each of my colleagues and myself are doing each and every day to ensure we're bringing people into the fold that haven't traditionally been a part of the conversation, or it wasn't obvious to them that they should be a part of the conversation. But what I want to say, and I want to leave you all with, is that this cannot be done without each and every one of you in this room. Everybody has a role to play, and as a partnership and engagement person, I hope I can play that role with you and help us get to our goal. So thanks very much for allowing me to share that with you.
So Sunil, talk to us about how all this comes together for communities, states, and businesses. How can technology accelerate some of this?
I'd be happy to. Thank you. Well, hello everyone. I'm Sunil Paul. I'm CEO of a company called Spring Free EV. We're trying to bring electric vehicles to the 99%. Oops.
Oh, that's still me.
We already know all about that.
Sorry.
So, my journey started on a day that kind of made me aware in a really visceral way about climate. We've all had these climate moments. For me, it was the day of Orange in the Bay Area. If anybody was in the Bay Area in late 2020, you cannot forget this day. It was apocalyptic. Forest fires caused the entire sky to be orange all day. We never saw the sun. And it just had a profound effect on anyone who was there. For me, it caused me to ask the question, what is going on with the world? And what can I do about it? What can I do beyond my investment in clean energy companies and sitting on boards? How can I apply my decades of entrepreneurship? How can I apply my understanding of what's going on with clean energy? And how can I apply my optimism? Because it's something that we all have to figure out. It turns out that if you take all of the optimistic projections of electric vehicle adoption, we still don't get to achieving net zero by 2050. In order to close that gap, we need about an extra 75 to 100 million extra electric vehicles around the world deployed in the next 8 years in order to get to the net zero goals, and obviously net zero for ground transportation. So we looked at that and said, okay, how can we take advantage of the three economic disruptions of the electric vehicle? Those are, they cost less to operate than a gas-powered car. They can interact with the grid, and when they do, in a smart way, they can get paid to do that. And third, electric vehicles are going to last much longer than gas-powered cars. And so we realized that this is a problem that can be solved if we do it in a smart way. One of the biggest problems is that the upfront cost is so high for electric vehicles. If we could bring down the upfront cost, then we can get this massive adoption of electric vehicles and make them available to the 99%. I'm going to show you examples of some of those folks in just a second. So our first product that takes advantage of these economic disruptions is the mileage purchase agreement. It's a simple idea. The idea is that we charge pennies per mile, think anywhere from 10 to 30 cents per mile, and we use that revenue stream over the life of the vehicle in order to bring down the capital cost. So you can see in this chart, a gas-powered car typically costs less than an electric vehicle, but with the mileage purchase agreement, we can bring down that upfront cost and Like, who doesn't want a car that costs less than a gas-powered car? We can make that happen. Our second product, excuse me, our second product is going to be, we're working on now, is one that takes advantage of that grid interaction. And something that's never been done before is to be able to use massive distributed networks of electric vehicles as a virtual power plant. So here's examples of some of our early customers. Our early niche are car sharing hosts, people who have built a business around having a small fleet of vehicles that they rent out on platforms like Turo and Get Around and HireCar, or they're renting them out directly. So there are folks like Abid in Austin. He's bootstrapped a fleet of over 100 vehicles that he puts out on Turo and other platforms. And he's got over a dozen vehicles with us now that are electric. Or folks like Brenda in Los Angeles. Brenda is a car dealer, a used car dealer, and she realized that she could start making money by putting some of her cars out and making money on them on Turo and other platforms. And so she started with two Teslas, which immediately started making money for her, and now she's ordered more. So this is our first niche of starting with car sharing hosts. There's several 100,000 cars like this in the United States. So you might ask, okay, well, that's nice, a couple 100,000 cars. How are you going to get to 100 million? Well, the answer is that this is our first niche. They use sedans, which are the cars that are available today. They all do a lot of miles. So there's other sectors like that, specifically the gig economy, the ride sharing and gig delivery world. So that's our next niche. And beyond that are high mileage drivers. High mileage drivers are about 10% of US drivers. They emit about 1/3 of gasoline and 1/3 of emissions. That population does an average of 30,000 miles a year. An average. If you know how many miles you do, most Americans do about 12,000. So that's kind of the immediate future. But the underlying nature of what we're doing is building out a technology platform for mileage purchase agreement and virtual power plant. And that technology platform can be used anywhere in the world to bring down the cost of electric vehicles. And that's how we get to massive deployment around the world. So what we're building is a company that, as we are more and more successful, as we're able to get to more and more niches and deploy this more widely, it has a direct climate impact. And for us, success is, of course, building out a very valuable new asset class around the electric vehicle and also building this technology platform. But the most important thing for us is that we close this gap and get to net zero. It is our number one goal as a company.
Thank you. So Claire works with me at the Department of Energy in our loan programs office, which is one of the offices in the Undersecretary's office for energy infrastructure. So talk to us about the loan programs office. We're doing a lot, and the loan program is sort of at the heart of this effort to build new muscle and working with communities and the business sector and the private sector. So tell us about that. How do we do a better job of it?
Yes, so I will echo everything Jeremiah has been underscoring around the importance of deployment at this point. So I think the IEA estimates that we have 80% of the technologies that we need to decarbonize, but of course the challenge is not simply constrained to the maturity of technology, it's also the maturity of capital markets to step in and fund these technologies at scale. So when we say the capital markets, we're not talking about some venture capital here, some private equity here, we're talking about billions of dollars being deployed at a time and thinking about how we de-risk that, whether that's market risk or that's technology risk or that's policy risk. That's where LPO steps in to try to buy down with very inexpensive capital buy down the scale up of about 20 different technology verticals that we work across. So my role at the Loan Programs Office is working, well, lucky me, I got 2 jobs. No good deed goes unpunished. So I have 2 roles at the Loan Programs Office. One is working directly for our executive director, Jigar Shah, who some of you might be familiar with. He's a very vocal character on social media. If you don't follow him already, you should. And in that capacity, we're working almost in a, I don't want to say policy making, it's more ensuring that LPO is not trying to reinvent the wheel, because again, the technologies that we're working in are not new to the Department of Energy. It's simply the scale up of deployment that is LPO's unique purview. So for example, if we are, say, trying to move offshore wind 30 gigawatts by 2030 into the mid-Atlantic, then we need to be working very closely with the Department of Interior's Bureau of Ocean Energy Management and the Wind Energy Technologies Office within the Department of Energy to do that successfully, to have the greatest impact possible. So that's kind of what I do in my front office role, working with Jigar. And my second job is in our outreach and business development team. So I'm actively hunting, recruiting, vetting technologies into our portfolio, primarily in the grid interactive, efficient buildings space. So as Keisha was talking about the importance of electrifying everything, on the same team. And I will refer, you'll hear me refer to this class of technologies as virtual power plants. That's how LPO likes to think of this stuff. When you connect all of those different electrified resources and you turn them into something that functions like a singular asset at scale. So that's a little bit about the Loan Programs Office, a little bit about my role specifically. I will just say very quickly here, because I want to get to Britta's introduction and then also answer as many lively questions from Jeremiah that we can. But very quickly, the Loan Programs Office has 3 loan programs. One is focused on advanced technology vehicle manufacturing. So think bringing EVs to scale into the market in a major way. Another is innovative clean energy, which includes our advanced modular reactor program. And then finally, a tribal energy program. So we wanted to make sure that we set aside several billion exclusively accessible to tribal communities. And then finally, just wanted to make sure that folks knew when I'm talking about 20 or so technology areas that we work across, the areas that we're seeing the most activity right now in terms of applications into the LPO from companies with exciting technologies that they need our help to scale: transmission, advanced modular reactors, as I mentioned, virtual power plants, storage, so both batteries and other, and biofuels. So we are doing this. I will end this preamble to the LPO with a bang. We are doing this at the scale of about 40 billion, it's B with a boy, in loan authority. So when we're talking about pushing money into the space, we're doing this at the many hundreds of millions of dollars in scale. So that's where LPO sits in that bridge to bankability.
Thank you. So Britta, tell us about Amoresco and doing all this clean technology work at scale.
Right. So thank you everybody for being here. It's really an honor to listen to where everybody's sort of come from as well. So my name is Britta McIntosh. I'm Senior Vice President at Amoresco, and I look after our West Region operations as well as our UK and European Union operations. So a lot of time zones in my day, but it's been really, it's an exciting opportunity that we have in front of us right now, sort of as a society. So, I often say that, we're in really sort of a perfect storm right now in climate change action. We have technology advancing at a rate that I have never seen in my career. It's just extraordinary how fast advanced technologies are moving and advancing. We also have a client that now really understands the benefit of implementing, climate conscious infrastructure improvements in the built environment. And are finally, instead of trying to talk people into doing these things, they're coming out and requesting these kinds of projects to be done. And I think that that's a new thing in the last 5 years or so, where we're spending less time talking people into why this is a good thing to do, and more time now finally deploying this now, as you mentioned, at scale in the built environment. And then that third part of the perfect storm is that you have a lot of companies like Ameresco who have the capabilities of deploying these things around the globe. So Ameresco is a clean tech integrator. What we do is implement advanced technology solutions in the built environment. How did I get there? Since we've all been sharing about where we came from. I'm a mechanical engineer by trade. I left college and ended up at a large consulting engineering company designing new buildings around the United States. What happened very quickly after that, in about a span of 19 or 20 months, we entered into a pretty severe recession. We stopped building new buildings when those kinds of things happen. And just by accident, because I was involved in my professional society, any of you young folks out there in the audience, stay involved in your professional society as you go through your career. It will pay off. I ended up just sort of falling into a job with an energy services company. Had no idea what an energy services company was, had no idea what that job was, but I needed one. So it has been a wild ride for the last 30 years as energy services and climate action initiatives have started to develop and grow. And so I've been fortunate to work for a number of really leading energy services companies in the United States, helping them build and get to scale as well. And I have ended up at Ameresco. First in London, helping them build their business in the European Union and the United Kingdom. I came home to the United States for just a regular visit home, February 28th, 2020. And then they closed the border on me, and I couldn't go back. So I'm back here and moved to California and helping to build the West region as well. So I need that. I'm going to talk a little bit about some projects that we do. Thank you. Let me see if I can make this thing work as well.
Other way.
That's not mine. That's not mine. Backwards. Where am I going? Someone needs some help. Should we keep going? This is a different presentation.
It looks like it's set up. It looks a different
Should I go
session.
back?
Maybe back one way? No?
Nope.
That's back
No?
Okay, so we'll talk about some projects. Let's see, off the top of my head. Again, shout out to Arizona State University. You guys are doing some amazing things. Yeah, good job out there. We've been involved with Arizona State University for about 20 years now, and they have invested about $250 million in energy-conscious infrastructure improvements on their campuses. And if anybody's been to ASU, it's a big place. So this is no small feat. And they are really, an example that other universities around the United States and abroad can look at some of the amazing things that they've done to make that campus more efficient. So really extraordinary. As far as advanced technologies goes, we work across all market sectors from public housing. We're talking about needing to make real advancements in our own homes. And communities of concern are the ones that suffer the most when it comes to being able to afford efficiency improvements, and they really need that help also the most. So we have an entire division that just works with bringing efficient technologies and improvements in public housing. We are working right now in New York City Public Housing. They are one of the largest public housing associations in the United States, helping to decarbonize that entire system around New York City. And that goes across the gamut to higher ed, universities, K through 12 schools, hospitals, commercial and industrial. As you mentioned, the industrial market sector has been an incredibly tough nut to crack, but they use so much energy that it's an opportunity for us, across all of the industries that are represented here to make some real advancements. And then we're also working with utility companies. So we're really proud to be working with Southern California Edison right now as they really lean into providing additional and advanced resiliency to their customers and the people that rely on them to keep the lights on. You know, a lot of people know that in California it's wildfire season coming up in a couple of months. It's just a thing, sort of like hurricane season. And, but we need to be prepared for those kinds of things. So we're in the process of helping them implement over 500 megawatts of battery energy storage within their service territory to help them provide resource adequacy to their customers. And we're also doing that for the federal government. So I want to also give a shout out to the federal government. We've been working with the Department of Energy also for a lot of years. We also are one of the partners that our Department of Defense uses quite regularly. They also lean forward amazingly into the application of advanced technologies. And they're looking for ways to make their military bases around the United States and abroad also not only net zero, but just more resilient and provide increased energy security. We're working on a project right now at the Coast Guard base in Petaluma, California, to help them not only go net zero with a combination of PV and battery storage and microgrids and additional generation, but also it allows them in times of emergency to supply the surrounding community as well that looks to them for that support. So it's really exciting to be working on some of those kinds of projects. Two others that I'll mention. In the city of Chicago, we just implemented 250,000 street lighting improvements. And while the implementation of LED street lighting provides for massive reduction in energy costs, in a place like Chicago where they struggle with security in many of their, and safety in many of their communities, having really great lighting systems in and around those neighborhoods has made things, you know, much more safe for them. And we're also working, oh, there we go, it's up there. All right, so some photos. Yeah, this one, next, it doesn't matter, you know. Let's see, I'll move next one. Yeah, I just mentioned Petaluma and Southern California, so let's see if we can go to the next one. Yeah, there we go, okay. I mentioned City of Chicago. We're also working in the UK. We've just been awarded a project that's pretty innovative to completely decarbonize the city of Bristol, England. And what Bristol, England decided to do, and they're calling it the Bristol City Leap. They're gonna leap forward into the next century. And we are going to form a company that is owned by two entities, Ameresco and the city of Bristol. So a true public-private partnership. And we're going to be looking first at their entire, what they call their estate, their owned buildings. So that's all of their housing, their social housing, all of their commercial and municipal buildings, hospitals, schools, everything that the city owns. They're looking to completely decarbonize, and then that's going to go into also their transportation system. And we're also setting up a system together with them where we're encouraging the local community, the commercial industrial side of the city, to also invest in this leap forward. So an opportunity for us to also mimic that around the United States. And look for opportunities for us to really, you know, as you mentioned, move things at scale. The opportunity is vast. The people are here to do it. We've got all the smart engineers around the United States and abroad to really make an impact. We have the technology. It's just like amazing what's going on in the industry right now. And really, we just need to keep taking that big leap forward and make some progress. Back to you.
Thank you. Big leap forward feels like a good summary for everything everyone's trying to do here, I think, and clearly what the world is calling for. I'm struck at how much of this is really community facing now, as opposed to a decade ago when, you know, it's sort of about utility scale wind and solar was sort of the fastest growing, probably still is, certainly by units of decarbonization right now. But in terms of what's moving and accelerating and growing, you know, we see electric vehicles at the small business fleet level. We see electric appliances in homes, campus communities. Claire's talking about virtual power plants, literally a federal loan to a project that is hundreds, thousands of small energy machines working together. So maybe, Keisha, at the community level, how does the federal government, how do institutions work better to get this sort of deployment, uptick of technology happening at the household level, at the community level?
Partnerships and trust. I think are the key words that I would use for community engagement. I used to do a lot of community engagement as a consumer advocate. First thing is that you have to build the trust, but there needs to be the partnerships to scale it, right? And I think working with partners that don't obviously make sense on its face are going to be some of the first partnerships that you want to run after, right? Because there's tons of opportunity there to bring these different entities together. And like I said earlier in my presentation, right, every sector can be a part of this. So if you see your business leaders or business community leaders, taking part in this clean energy future that we're trying to accelerate here, it drives other people in the community to want to participate, because if I'm living in your community and I see that you're doing spring EV and I'm like, well, that's my neighbor, maybe there's something that I can do to participate, and maybe there's an opportunity to partner as a mayor with Amoresco to change, the way our cities are powering ourselves. I look at Ithaca as an example, and the work that they're doing there, which is so amazing and so good to see that a city is willing to take that leap and that jump, right? And hopefully much more communities and city leaders and businesses will become a part of this movement in order to drive the engagement and the trust in the communities that will lead to adoption.
And this is Ithaca, New York.
Yes, sorry.
Tell our audience what Ithaca's doing.
Yeah. Oh, well, Ithaca is basically becoming an electric city, right? We get to work with them on a pretty regular basis, and when we look at the work that they're doing, there's a company that's a part of our CEO coalition. So we have a coalition of CEOs ranging from all industries, and Block Power happens to be one of those companies that are a part of our coalition of CEOs, and working with the city of Ithaca to transition their community to an all electric clean energy space. This is a city that can lead us forward. We think about other cities that are, sort of in the pipeline for these kind of opportunities. I think about Pittsburgh as being like a perfect place to sort of also look at doing some electrification pilot projects as well. So Ithaca in that space is a leader and a community that we're happy to be working with as well.
That's great. Another trend it feels like is coming out is sort of the combination of the grid interactivity, right? That so much of the benefit here can come from the electricity savings, or in the case of vehicles, fuel savings turning into grid savings. But then you get monetized grid benefits too, as your electric vehicle battery can provide grid services. And there's also this sort of notion that while there's an upfront cost, it pays for itself over time, and that can be financed. So Sunil, and I think maybe Britta, tell us a little about how do those models come together, and what is sort of the next, what does the future look like? How can the government help? How do we bring new institutional models for getting all those benefits?
Yeah, well, thanks. I think, look, it is the fundamental nature of so many of these technologies that they cost a lot, but they operate at low cost. And because they're almost always electric, that they interact with the grid. We've chosen the electric vehicle. We're going deep on that. But the same is true of water heaters and heat pumps and all the rest. So applying this kind of innovation to other categories is absolutely something that can be done. It's already done at large scale. The question is, how do you do it at really small scale? And information technology is really the key to unlocking that, because you can bring it down to that really small scale. We believe ultimately down to a heat pump as well. Anything else?
I think one of the things we do terribly in the industry is we don't celebrate our successes as much as we should and get that word out. We are, as a society, very driven to low cost, right? The Walmart model. We want the cheapest of everything, and not realizing that there is a long-term operating cost. And so to your point, also, you had one slide there that talked about sort of first cost of a gas-powered vehicle versus an electric vehicle, but the long-term operating cost. We need to get to the point where we understand, as these advanced technologies continue to get less expensive, we also need to be highlighting that we're in it for the long game here, that's the ultimate goal. We have to understand that that investment is a better investment to be making today than the cheapest first cost project. We need to be thinking about long-term costs as well.
can I just add one thing? I know we're almost out of time. Just, was Monday yesterday? Okay, yeah, just yesterday. President Biden invoked the DPA, right? That's great news, folks, because that's going to help accelerate a lot of these clean energy, or production of a lot of these clean energy technologies. Just 90 days ago, Rewiring America was lobbying the White House and the administration to add heat pumps to that. And heat pumps are a part of it. And so get a heat pump, everyone. It's really efficient. So I just wanted to point out that's another way that the government, right, can drive this is, by invoking things like the DPA to help drive manufacturing and get, people the things that they need.
Absolutely. Claire, any closing thoughts as we wrap up here?
Oh, good question. So I think I'll conclude it on this note, and then we'll just have to go out into the hall to continue the conversation. But when the LPO thinks about impact, and we ultimately are working, directly with companies and technologies, but ultimately we're trying to connect the investor community to actual communities, to states, to cities, to people. And when the LPO looks at our our list of successes, 9 million megawatt hours of clean energy produced, 562,500 electric vehicles deployed on the road, 37,000 permanent jobs through the loan programs, offices, investments. With the additional layer of Justice 40, on top of that, we have to get much more specific about who we are bringing these technologies to. And that is, it is my handoff to the part 2 conversation that we're going to have in the hall. But it's all of the people on this panel. I know have very strong thoughts about how we bring these technologies not just to America, but historically marginalized, underserved communities.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Well said. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.